Hi, it's Penny here, and in this video I'm going to be going through my favourite books that I've read that were released for each year that I've been alive. So this video was inspired by Kayla at Books and Lala, who did a similar video just the other day, but I do have an extra 10 years to cover that Kayla didn't have, so we've got a lot to get through. But also I did have to go off Goodreads to complete this, just because a lot of the books that I've read from the 80s were ones that I read in the 90s and the 2000s before I started using Goodreads, because I didn't actually start using Goodreads until 2016. Also, I was surprised to see how many of these I own. I have quite a few stacks of books here in preparation. Usually I don't really buy new books, even my favorites. I want to own my favorites, but I tend to just wait to see if I can find them at secondhand stores, you know, wait for fate to help me find them. And I guess that strategy works because I have a lot of these. There are still a lot of favorite books I don't have though. But anyway, let me get into all the books, and we're going to start off with 1980. Honestly, being born in a nice round number year does make it very easy to work out how old you are. I'm very jealous of everyone born in 2000. But so, 1980, the first book we have is The Wounded Land by Stephen Donaldson. So this is the first book in the second Chronicles of Thomas Covenant the Unbeliever. I think I talked about this in a video the other day about morally grey characters. So this follows a man named Thomas Covenant who is very grumpy. He's got leprosy, but he finds himself in this magical world where they believe he's the chosen one and he's going to save everyone, even though he doesn't really believe that's what's happening. In fact, for most of the first Chronicles, he thinks it's a dream, and even in these second Chronicles, I think he goes back to being like, yeah, but maybe this is a dream. It's been a long time since I read this series, but I would like to reread it. Then, 1981, we have The Many-Coloured Land by Julian May. This is the first book in the Pliocene Saga Quartet. This is a bind-up of the first two books, The Many-Coloured Land and The Golden Talk. So this is like a science fiction series where they find this like portal that sends people back in time, and they use it to send criminals back in time to like the Pliocene era, I guess. And they just send these criminals back in time. They're so far back in time, there's nothing there, kind of like killing them without killing them, because we'll just never see them again, and they can do whatever they want back there because they can't really cause any trouble anyway, is the thinking. But basically we follow a group of criminals. Debatable whether some of them are as criminal as others. They get sent back in time, and when they get there they discover that there's more going on than they expected. I really love this series, and it's going to come up in further years, because even though I wanted to have like no series repeats, sometimes it's necessary. Anyway, 1982 we have The Crystal Singer. I actually have two different covers for this. I kind of prefer this one, but this one might be a better match for the book. Again, it's been a long time since I read this. So The Crystal Singer by Anne McCaffrey. Anne McCaffrey wrote the Dragons of Pern series, which I don't think made it onto this list. But in this one, we're following this woman. I think she kind of wanted to be an opera singer, and that hasn't worked out. So now she's decided to become this crystal singer. But I think they're really just working kind of on this mining operation, finding these crystals. But when you mine these crystals, like it messes with your mind or something. I don't know. It's been a while, but I would love to reread this series. I'll just assume that for every book that I read in the 80s, shall we? Then, 1983. So we have The Nomborn King, which is the third book in that Pliocene saga that I was talking about. I don't think I have much more to say about it other than I love the series. Then, 1984 is two books from the Chasuli Chronicles by Jennifer Roberson. I've only got this book, which is book 4. But in 1984, the first book of the series came out. I would really love to reread this one. Even though I barely remember it, and I'm kind of worried I might not like it on a reread. I kind of think it was like a generational tale where each book is a different generation, and it's kind of about these two warring families, and every generation they kind of almost have a romance between two people, but then things go wrong. And it's left to the next generation to try and fix things again. But it's an 8-book series, so there's definitely more to it than that. Oh, and then 1985 is the second book in the series, The Song of Homina. Like I said, I tried not to repeat series, but I really don't have a lot of options for 1985. And I think that 20-year-old me loved this series, so I think it deserves to be on this list, even though I no longer have much memory of it. And then 1986 is a book that I have read many times. This is Christie's Great Idea, the first book in the Babysitter's Club series, which is a book of like 100, 200 books. I mean, probably more if you count all the spin-offs. Maybe it's even like 300 books. I haven't even read them all, but I have read probably at least 200 of them. 150. Let's give myself 150. So this is just a book series about this group of girls who form a babysitting club and learn a lot of life lessons along the way. There were some fantasy books that I rated highly from the year of 1986, but I had to include this just because this was such a foundational series for me. I think almost every other book on the list is fantasy or science fiction, but I really do love the Babysitter's Club. Then in 1987, we have Intervention by Julian May. So this is a book that kind of links the previous Plesian Saga series into Julian May's next series, the Galactic Maloo trilogy. So the Galactic Maloo is kind of like X-Men-ish, where these families start gaining these psychic abilities, and it really shows what happens to society as a result. And in fact, the criminals from the Plesian Saga are from that time, and some of their crimes are related to what happens during this discovery of humans' psychic abilities. But Intervention is like, I think, again, it's been a long time since I read it, but basically humans are having a lot of troubles after discovering these psychic abilities, and the aliens come and intervene, and there's a whole bunch of different alien races, but it's the most interesting thing is how it links this particular family into both the earlier trilogy and the later trilogy. Anyway, I really want to read it because it's so complex and I loved it. Then 1988 was the beginning of the Sword Dancer series, again by Jennifer Roberson, who wrote the Chasuli Chronicles I was just talking about. So this is the bind-up of the first two books in that series. In Sword Dancer, basically Dell comes along and asks Tiger for help to find her brother who has been kidnapped after the rest of her family was all murdered. Tiger is a sword dancer in this desert country where her brother has been taken away to, and he doesn't really believe that Dell is a sword singer and has just as many abilities as him, but along the way he learns. This is now an 8-book series. The 8th book just came out this year, last month, which is kind of crazy because that means this book series has almost been going as long as I've been alive. Almost, not quite. Then for 1989, I don't actually have the books, but I have some stand-ins. And I actually also chose 2 books for 1989 because I couldn't decide. But these books are similar-ish. So firstly, I picked The Fog by Caroline B. Cooney. I have both the sequel, The Fire, and the 3rd book in the trilogy, The Snow, but I've never found The Fog, even though I think it's my favorite in the series. So this is like a point thriller. Honestly, in my early teens, I just read point thrillers all the time. I love them. And in The Fog, this girl, Christina, who's been raised on this island, comes across to the mainland to stay in like this boarding house, I guess, that all these island children stay in with this family, but then very strange things start happening and she kind of starts to doubt her own sanity. Like, this is probably the earliest gaslighting that I ever read about, but I really love this series. I love it a lot. As well, I also wanted to include Remember Me by Christopher Pike. So just because it's a very similar kind of book and it's about the time that I was reading all these kind of supernatural and teen thriller type things. And Christopher Pike was like a massive author for me around this time. He wrote so many great supernatural teen thriller type books. But Remember Me is about this girl who dies and then she comes back as a ghost and tries to figure out how she died. Okay, then we're up to the 90s and I have Black Trillium by Marion Bradley, Julian May, and Andre Norton. So this is actually ended up being the first book in a series, kind of. So these 3 quite big fantasy authors at the time wrote this together. It's a story of 3 sisters. I don't really remember any more than that. Like a fantasy story with 3 sisters and this black trillium flower having some kind of meaning. They wrote it together and each author was writing a different sister's story, and then afterwards they went away and wrote individual follow-ons from it. I'm wondering if this book has any mention of them I kind of doubt it because this feels like a very early edition. This is another one I'd really like to reread at some point. But I'm worried that if I reread this, I'm then going to want to go and reread all the other books in the series as well. I think there were just 3 more though. There might have been 4. I should look it up. So there's 4 more books in the series. It looks like Julie and May wrote 2 of them, and the other 2 wrote 1 each. Anyway, then we have 1991, and the book for this is The Magic of Recluse. I used to own this whole series, or at least most of it, because now I think it's like a 22 book series, and each book is like kind of like a big chunky book like this. So it's a massive series. At one point, I think I owned about the first 12 books. And honestly, I only got this series because I bought some other books from this old man, and when I turned up to pick them up, they were like, he's dying, so we need to get rid of all his books. Are there any other ones you'd like? And he had this massive library, and I really didn't know that much. Like, this was back before the internet was very developed, so there was stuff online, but not a lot. So like, there was no way of knowing what any of these books were, but I happened to see there was this series of books, and I picked it up, and it was the Magic of Recluse series. And then I actually ended up really loving it, even though the books are very chunky. So this is a world where the magic is based on order and chaos, but opposite to a lot of worlds, chaos is represented by the color of white and order is the color black. So Recluse is this island which is all based on order magic, and we follow this young boy kind of being raised on this island, but eventually deciding to go off and travel the world. I almost think he gets sent away, actually. Again, it's been a long time since I read the first book, and I don't know if I could reread a 20-book series. But when he goes off the island, he kind of learns that there is this balance in the world, and so by creating this island that's so heavy in order, even though that means life is great on the island, it has a lot of consequences for other people. So this is written by Ali Modesitt Jr., who's just amazing at writing like great economics and like real worlds that feel very real. And the 20-book series, kind of each one is almost a standalone, but overall it kind of slowly builds up this bigger network of interconnected stories. Then in 1992 I had Tandia by Bryce Courtney. This is actually the sequel to The Power of One, which is a very well-known book about this young boy who grows up in South Africa, and he's very involved in boxing, but also very involved in kind of the anti-racism movement. And then Tandia is this young girl who grows up in like a brothel. It's been a long time since I read this one as well. And then I guess she gets involved in this anti-racism movement as well, and eventually meets the boy from The Power of One, because we know of her in The Power of One, so this is kind of like her story. Anyway, I loved it. On to the stack. Then in 1993 we have The Legend of Nightfall by Miki Zakarakit. So this is a book where certain people have these gifts that give them different magical powers, and Nightfall has the ability to change his weight, but he decides to use this for crime. And he's a very well-known thief, but then he gets captured and they make a deal with him that he can have his freedom, but only if he spends a year with this prince, like training him to be a better person. You know, that storyline doesn't sound like it makes a lot of sense now, but I'm sure it did. There was also a sequel to this that I really loved. It's right in front of me. This is another series I'd love to read again. At some point I'm going to be doing like a whole 80s and 90s fantasy reread type thing. I just need to catch up on all my other series first. Then 1994 is another year where I honestly couldn't decide. For books that I do own, I have The Ruins of Ambrai by Melanie Rawn. This is supposedly going to be a trilogy. It's about these 3 sisters, and I believe that they were the children of 2 people that ended up on opposite sides of this war, and so they've kind of been hidden away. But I remember this being such like an amazingly complex series. The saddest thing about this series is that the 3rd book has never been released. I think it's been probably 20 years now since the 2nd book came out. Melanie Rawn unfortunately had a bunch of like personal problems and just has never gotten back to writing it. I think like about 5 years ago she announced that she was going to try, but I just haven't heard anything lately. So it's possible we'll never get the 3rd book. But I think I would still like to reread this. I've just been holding out hope that we would get an announcement about the 3rd book so that like I could reread it in time for that to come out. but I don't know if that will ever happen. Then the other book that I wanted to talk about for 1994 is Sing the Four Quarters by Tanya Huff. This is the first book in a quartet, and I've just realized I don't really know what it's about anymore. I think it was kind of like this elemental magic, but also like singing and music. Oh, I think the main character was a bard. Okay, I actually just read the synopsis because I should tell you what it's actually about. So what happened is she gave up her position in the royal family in order to become a bard, but then she gets pregnant, which she wasn't supposed to do since she gave up her place in the line of succession. And so now she's being chased. I think there was a lot more, though. Again, another one to reread at some point. Okay, then for 95, 96, and 97, I have 3 books from the same trilogy. Look, nothing could beat these books in those years. So, firstly, I have Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb, then Royal Assassin, and then finally Assassin's Quest. If you watch my channel at all, you know I love Robin Hobb and I love the Realm of the Elderlings. This trilogy follows this boy named Fitz, who is the bastard son of the king in waiting, and he's being trained up to be an assassin for the royal family. But there is a lot more going on in this world, and Fitz goes through some really terrible times, as well as having some good adventures along the way. These are very slow-paced books, but I just love them. And then if you love these, you get to read the whole Realm of the Elderlings, which is 16 books long. Then for 1998, I could have just moved on to the Live Ship Traders trilogy, also by Robin Hobb, also in the Realm of the Elderlings, but I was good. I haven't done that. What I have instead is Summon the Keeper by Tanya Huff. This is the first book in a trilogy, following this woman who is a keeper, which basically means she manages like the portal to hell. My favorite thing about this book is that hell is kind of like anthropomorphized, so hell talks and has a personality, and honestly is kind of useless, and I love it. We also have her cat Austin, who is just such a cat-like cat. I love him. The series is like so humorous, but also just fun and clever, and I loved it. Then 1999, I don't have this book, but my sister has the whole series, and that is The Bad Beginning by Lemony Snicket, the first book in a series of unfortunate events. So this follows the 3 Baudelaire orphans as they try to find a new family to take care of them, as well as trying to figure out about this secret organization that their parents were a part of and figure out a little bit about why their parents died. But this book just has like an amazing narration style. It's so dark and humorous, while also still being appropriate for younger readers. And I just love the whole series, so I had to include this one in the list. Then we are on to the 2000s. 20 years of my life already done. So firstly, in 2000 we have Uzumaki by Junji Ito. This is a book about spirals that start taking over this town, and it just escalates and escalates and becomes utterly terrifying. It's a horror manga, if I didn't say. Just terrifying, basically. Then in 2001, I feel like I should actually pick Dead Until Dark by Charlene Harris, which is the first book in the Sookie Stackhouse series, only because when I do look at my Goodreads from 2016, when I started my account, all I was reading was the Sookie Stackhouse series. So it probably does deserve to be on the list. However, I think I reread it at some point, and I don't think I liked it as much. And when I think back on it, like some of these books I haven't read in a long time, but when I think back on them, I think, oof, yeah, I can't wait to reread them. The Sookie Stackhouse series, I don't know that I would like it if I went back to it. So I'll probably keep it in the past. So I didn't put it on this list. What I have picked instead is American Gods by Neil Gaiman. So this follows this man, Shadow, who gets out of prison and ends up following it along with this man called Mr. Wednesday, who gets him involved in kind of all these criminal hijinks that involve the gods as they go on a road trip across America. This is very strange, which is totally Neil Gaiman's style. I haven't liked a lot of Neil Gaiman's stuff that I've read, but this I really liked. I think I liked how dark it is, and it's not quite as like nonsensical as some of his other stuff. Then in 2002 we have Stories of Your Life and Others by Ted Chiang. This is the stupid movie edition with the Arrival cover on it, because one of the short stories in this is what the movie Arrival was based on. I really need to get a better copy of this, but I feel like it's very unlikely I'll find it in a secondhand shop. But I love this. It's basically a short story anthology with all these science fiction stories that are so like complex and really make you think. Definitely one to go into when you've got a bit of brain power going, especially like I think most of them are fine, but there were a couple that I remember really stretched my brain. Honestly, every time I talk about this book and his other short story anthology in a video, I just want to sit down and reread them straight away. Let's put it down before we're too tempted. Then in 2003, I couldn't help but include another Robin Hood book. This is Fool's Fate, the third book in the 20-Man trilogy. The 20-Man trilogy is probably my least favorite trilogy in the realm of the Elderlings, but Fool's Fate is probably my favorite book from that trilogy. And it is hard to talk about what this trilogy is even about because the first half of the first book of the trilogy just doesn't really even tell you. But basically, at the beginning, Fitz has tried to kind of retire from royal life, not be involved in any of this assassination nonsense, but he gets pulled back into things. And I guess in this third book, you can tell by the dragons on the front of the book, they go on a bit of a quest to find some dragons. Then in 2004, we have Death Note Volume 1, Boredom, by Tsugumi Oba and Takeshi Obata. So this is about this book that this Shinigami drops. It's a Death Note book, so if you write someone's name in this notebook, then they will die. And there's a bunch more rules around what you can write in the notebook and how it works exactly. And this boy named Light Yagumi picks up this notebook and decides to start using it to kill off criminals. As well, there is this other man named Light. Man, boy, anyway, basically this is just a big battle of wits between Light and L as they try to expose each other. It gets really twisty. There are parts of the series that are not as good as others, but overall I loved it. And this first one was a great introduction. The final pile. Then in 2005 we have Elantris by Brandon Sanderson. This was his debut novel. It's set in the city of Elantris, which once was this beautiful glowing city where the people who lived there were like gods. They had these magical powers. Then one day something happened and now that city is all like rotten and dirty, and instead of people becoming blessed and becoming these glowing beings, they become cursed with the Sheod, which kind of makes them a little bit like zombies, and these people get thrown into the city where they're basically quarantined away. I know a lot of people think this first book of his wasn't as good as some of his other stuff, but honestly, I think it's a really good setup for what you can expect from Brandon Sanderson. And then in 2006, we have Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. So this, I think, is actually his best series. I'm just starting a Cosmere reread. I'm actually reading Mistborn right now, hence why my bookmark is in it. So maybe I'll change my mind once I've done my Cosmere reread. But this one, we're basically following a group of people who have these different elemency magical powers, which is basically they can ingest metals and then gain different abilities depending on the metals that they ingest. There's also a lot more other kinds of magic in this world as well, but this group is trying to bring down the Lord Ruler, who has been in power for 1,000 years and has just kind of like enslaved everybody and definitely deserves to be overthrown, even though it seems like it's impossible. Then in 2007 we have Vida Nostra by Marina and Sergei Dyachenko. So this is a book that was translated from Russian. It's written by a Ukrainian couple. It's very strange. We follow this young girl who, while on vacation with her mother, meets this man who starts giving her strange tasks. And by completing these tasks, she gets into this Institute of Special Technologies, where they're given these lessons that are also very strange, and if they're not doing well in school, there are very negative consequences for their loved ones and their family. But I guess just the journey and the metamorphosis that these students go through during their schooling was so strange but so mind-blowing. I absolutely loved it. But definitely not a book for people who like to understand everything that they're reading. Then in 2008 we actually have Magic Burns by Alona Andrews. I do have the first book, Magic Bites, here as well because this was the year before, but I love the Kate Daniels series so much and I wanted to pick Magic Bites, but Vida Nostra is probably slightly better than Magic Bites. But the Kate Daniels series does get better and better all the way up to the 10th book. There are then a bunch of spin-off series that have come after that, but basically we're following along with Kate Daniels, who is a mercenary in this world where magic has started to come back, but it's coming back in waves. So sometimes magic works and sometimes technology works. And there's also this escalating conflict that's going on between Kate and this quite powerful, let's call him a magician. This is one of my most favourite series ever, even though normally I hold up the 10th book because these first book's covers are ugly. Then, 2009, I actually only had the choice between choosing Dragon Keeper, the first book in the Brainwild Chronicles by Robin Hobb, or Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson. I kind of didn't want to pick either of those authors because I picked them too much, but those were my choices. So maybe I need to read some more great books from 2009. But I still do really like Warbreaker. I don't think it's my favourite Sanderson, but I do really like it. In typical Brandon Sanderson style, though, there are kind of a few different things going on that all connect together, so it's hard to talk about. But I think the way people normally summarize it is to say that there is this kingdom where the princess has been raised believing that she's going to be sent to this other neighbouring kingdom where they have this weird stuff going on with these evil gods. They think they're going to send her off to marry this god king, but at the last minute the king decides he doesn't want to send away his favourite daughter, so he sends his younger daughter, who's totally unprepared. And we're basically following along with this younger daughter as she tries to figure out what the hell's going on. And also the older daughter who decides she needs to go and save her sister. We also have the perspective from this man who is a god but doesn't believe he's a god. And he is actually my favourite character. No, I take that back. My favourite character is actually this magic sword, Nightblood. Honestly, I actually think a strength of Brandon Sanderson's that people don't often talk about is how great he is at writing inanimate objects. Then we're up to 2010. We are getting closer and closer to current times. So for 2010, we've got The Black Prism by Brent Weeks. This is the first book in a 5-book series in this world where there's color-based magic. So these people called drafters can turn colored light into physical materials. And there is this, I guess, religious figure called the Black Prism who's able to draft all the different colors of light, and he can like split white light into all the different colors. But there's also like a lot more going on in this series. The Black Prism is not everything that you think he is, and there's a lot of other like political manipulation going on. I always feel like I need to put in content warnings for this series. Like, I love it, and a lot of people love it, but some people hate it just the way that Brent Weeks writes women or has his characters talk about women. Not so great. And a bit of fat phobia and other problems in there as well. But if you can like get through that, then I think it's worth a go. Then for 2011, we have The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. This is such a hard book to talk about. It's kind of about a magician competition, but I think what's so great about it is that it's magic in this way where magic just isn't very understandable. So the competition is never really explicit. And even what's really happening with the magic is written in this very poetical, beautiful way that doesn't really tell you what's happening. But in general, we're following along with these people who are involved in the circus and how they are affected by this competition between these two older magicians. The competition is really between the proteges of these magicians. And even though these older magicians have like problems with each other, the younger ones don't really. But it's just so beautifully written. So again, like, if you want to know exactly what's happening, this is not the book for you. But if you love beautiful writing and just like magic as a magical concept, then I think you might like The Night Circus. It's a very popular book. You've probably heard about it. Then in 2012, we have The Raven Boys by Maggie Stiefvater. This is a quartet. Then there's a spin-off series that I also love, basically following a girl named Blue, who is part of this psychic family, although she doesn't necessarily have any psychic abilities herself. And she meets up with this group of private school boys, one of whom has this plan to find this dead Welsh king who he thinks will grant him a wish. But honestly, it's just written Maggie Stiefvater style where it's very strange. Am I starting to make it sound like I really like strange things? Yes, I do. But I think what most people like this particular series for is the friend group. But like the strange magical things are my favourite part about it. Then in 2013, we have Vicious by V. Schwab. This is about these two friends at university who are investigating extraordinaries or people with like extraordinary abilities, and they're trying to discover how these people get these abilities. It's also written kind of two timelines, so we're also following along when they are now much older. They have these extraordinary abilities and they are out to kill each other. And throughout the book, you figure out exactly why that is. I've had mixed experiences with a lot of V. Schwab's books, but this book is one that I definitely love. Then in 2014, we have The Girl with All the Gifts by Emma Carey. I never know with this book whether it's okay to say what this book is about. I feel like if you go into this book not knowing what it's about and you don't like that thing, you might be annoyed about it. So it's probably better just to say it. But also it kind of ruins the discovery of what's going on. So in this one, there are these children, and every day they are brought out of their cages to go to school. They are chained to wheelchairs and they have guns pointed at their heads the whole time they're in class. And eventually you figure out what's going on. It's kind of post-apocalyptic. Actually, what I loved is just the character investigations and the character development. And as well, I think a lot of people don't realize that there is also a sequel or a prequel, The Boy on the Bridge. So if you've read The Girl with All the Gifts and you loved it, and you haven't read The Boy on the Bridge, you are missing out. Then, 2015, we have The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. This is the first book in a trilogy, but I really think this book is the best book in the trilogy. So we are following three perspectives. One is a young girl who has just discovered that she has these magical powers where she can control the earth, and she's being taken away for schooling. We also have like an older girl who is doing this magic training and kind of realizing why they're being trained to use this magic and how they're being taken advantage of. And then we're also following this older woman who has just gotten home and discovered that her husband has killed her baby because he realized this baby has these magical powers. And in this world, it's like regularly they have this fifth season, which is kind of like an apocalyptic type event, and the world is set up to always be prepared for one of these events to happen. And these origins who have these magical abilities are really treated with a lot of fear, even though they also have a lot of power. It's a really amazing world, and just the way that it's written, like each perspective is written from a different narrative point of view. So you've got some first person, some second person, and some third person. And just the way that that all comes together is amazing. Like heartbreaking, kind of awful, definitely like trigger warnings for death of a child, but like amazing. We still have a lot of years left, but I only have 2 more books on my pile. I think that's a sign that secondhand stores have gifted me a lot of older books, not so many newer books. So maybe eventually the secondhand stores will get all of these ones. Anyway, for 2016, we have Roses and Rock by Kat Howard. This is kind of a dark academia, although maybe not as dark as I would like. But we have these 2 sisters who are very artistic. One of them is a dancer and the other one is a writer. I could have that wrong. But basically they get into this special like school for artists where they end up kind of competing against each other for this particular benefit that is debatably not a great thing to win. So not only are they trying to win for themselves, but they're also kind of trying to win to protect their sister from winning. And maybe there's some fae involved. Anyway, I love it. Then in 2017, we have All the Crooked Saints by Maggie Stiefvater. This is a story about this family that grants miracles. And those miracles are made up of 2 parts. So the first part kind of brings into reality the darkness that the person is struggling with in some kind of way that they have to work through before they can achieve the second miracle. And it's really just showing how this family is struggling with that, as well as how some of these like pilgrims that have come for miracles are struggling. But like, again, it's just Maggie Stiefvater's really strange writing style. I think I just love Maggie Stiefvater's brain. So I love this one, and I think as well I just read it at just the right time for it to have like a good emotional impact on me. Then in 2018, we had volumes 5 and 6 of the Descender graphic novel series by Jeff Lemire and Justin Nguyen. So the Descender series is set in this world where basically humans have spread out across the universe, but then these giant robots turn up and just like kill off a bunch of the humans. So then humans decide, well, we better get rid of all these robots because it doesn't seem very safe. So they're going around and culling all the robots. And mainly we're following this young robot who was like a companion robot for this young boy, and he's woken up on this moon and his family is missing and he's just trying to find them. But he gets all bound up in this investigation about where did these giant robots come from? Then in 2019, we have Middle Game by Shauna Maguire. So this follows two young children, one who has the power of language and one who has the power of maths. And they are being manipulated by alchemists to try and turn them into gods so that these alchemists can like basically be able to control them as gods. So we're basically following them right from childhood until they become adults and just learning about their abilities and facing off against these alchemists. But again, I think I just really love magic that is quite unknowable, not easy to understand, because I feel like that's what magic would be like. Like if magic was easy to understand, wouldn't I already have magic? Unfortunately, I did absolutely hate the sequel to Middle Game, but I have reread Middle Game and I still loved it on the reread, so I know that it solidly belongs on this list. Then in 2020, we have The Betrayals by Bridget Collins. This book is kind of, again, a dark academia book. I like dark academia books which are kind of have a magical element which isn't very understandable again. So this is a story about a disgraced politician who gets sent to this school where he also studied when he was younger, and it is a school for the game. And it's never really clear what the game is. It kind of seems like these students are learning to compose music, plays, something else, something more than that. Definitely throughout the book it says very clearly that the game is not any of those things, but it definitely has elements of that. I think what I loved about this book is even though throughout the book you get like endless descriptions of the game, you still also never understand it. But also, as well as following this politician as he goes back to this school, we're also following through his journals when he was younger and learning about this fight he had with this other boy at school when he was younger and how that connects into the present times. And I just loved it so much. I couldn't stop reading it. It was amazing. Then in 2021, we have A Psalm for the Wild Built by Becky Chambers. There are 2 books in this series so far. I just hope in my heart that there will be more books at some point. So in this, we're following this tea monk named Dex. How do I not know that? Dex. So Dex is really unsure about what they want to do with their life, so they decide to go out into the wilderness. While they're there, they meet this robot named Mosscap. So in this world, at some point, the robots decided that they were just going to go and live in the wilderness, and they asked the humans never to talk to them again. So basically, humans have had to learn to live a bit more with nature and without the robots. But then Dex meets up with this robot Mosscap, and Mosscap has been sent as a representative by the robots to see how the humans are going. And just, it's so beautiful. Just these 2 different, very different people. Are they people? No, one's a robot. But they're very different, but they're still both kind of trying to figure out what they want from life, and it's beautiful. I love it. Then 2022, we have Ruby Fever by Alona Andrews. So I already mentioned the Kate Daniels series by Alona Andrews. Ruby Fever is the last published book in the Hidden Legacy series. So in the Hidden Legacy series, we have the first trilogy, which follows the oldest sister, Nevada. And she's basically trying to get her family's private investigation family going. In this world, there are different psychic abilities that are passed down through families. And so certain families that have a lot of magical power also have a lot of political power. And Nevada's family themselves do have a lot of power. Initially, not a lot of political power, but that does change throughout the series. In the second trilogy in this series is Catalina, the Second Sisters series. So Nevada has the ability where she can tell whether people are telling the truth or not, and Catalina has the ability to make people fall in love with her. I was really surprised how much Alona Andrews was able to do with those ideas. And even though the first books in the Hidden Legacy series have the most ugly covers, and make them seem like they're going to be like erotica novels. They're really not. There's an amazing fantasy plot in there, and like the way that family is written and just the characters. Honestly, I love it. And Ruby Fever was just like an amazing conclusion to the series. I am still hoping that we will get another trilogy following the youngest sister, so fingers crossed. Then lastly, 2023. So far, the best release of the year, in my opinion, has been Magic Tides, also by Alona Andrews. So this is like a little spin-off series. Basically, at the end of the series, Kate Daniels and her love interest have gone off to try and just live like a simple family life. It isn't going well. So Magic Tides is the first of, I think, what's going to be several like shorter novellas following Kate as she just tries to live a normal life and absolutely fails. The second book, Magic Claims, is coming out in June though, so that might take over from Magic Tides. I'm not sure how many other releases have a chance of competing for the position though. Anyway, that was a lot of books, but let me know if you've read any of them or if you've got any thoughts about them. Also, let me know whether you think you've read a book that was released in every year that you've been alive. A good book, not just any book. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you are doing well, and I will see you next time.